You just hit the side arrow?
This is the moment when a team in Papua New Guinea found a long-lost bird.
Doka? 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 What is this? It's owl.
That is the joy of finding an animal lost to science for more than 100 years. Welcome to Rewild's search for lost species, which scours the planet for animals, plants, and fungi that scientists feared lost for at least a decade. The search for lost species has found more than a dozen of our most wanted and documented many rare ones along the way, like the Voltskow's chameleon, Fagild's trapdoor spider.
It's more important than holding a treasure. For me, it was more valuable to hold that spider than any other object that I ever held in my life.
Attenborough's long-beaked echidna, the Somali sengi, the big puma fungus.
Fue una alegría inmensa de compartir esta alegría con las personas de la comunidad.
And this little nugget. It's the world's most crucial game of lost and found, given that an estimated 1 million species are at risk of extinction by 2050. Our goal is to reverse that. Finding a species is just the beginning. Each rediscovery leads to media coverage reaching billions, capturing our imaginations, raising awareness,
Get it, Doc. Can't we just save them for fashion?
contributing crucial knowledge, leading to real, tangible conservation on the ground.
Finding the species opens doors for us to pursue habitat protection as well as conservation projects for other species that are also in the same ecosystem.
As our quest continues, you can support us as we search for lost sharks, lost fishes, lost birds, lost amphibians, and more. Because what these rediscoveries teach us is all is not lost. What is lost can be found. We can protect and restore our planet. Together, let's find something wild for all wild kind.
Man! Shit, my legs are shivering. I can't believe it. God.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Rennick-Mayer, and I'm the Communications Director for Rewild. We're really excited to have you here today. It's the last day of the second annual Lost Species Month, and we've had a really great month of sharing stories about lost species, talking about the people looking for them, and the various impacts of the program. I helped to develop and launch the Search for Lost Species in 2017, and it's been really amazing to see the many ways that the program has grown, including the topic we're going to cover today, but how to engage citizen scientists as a key part of the program. So today's panel focuses specifically on the role of citizen scientists in the search. And while most people probably know what a citizen scientist is, for those of you who don't, they're non-scientists who help collect data to ultimately inform science. And in the case of our program, citizen scientists can and have actually helped us rediscover lost species. So we have a really exciting panel here today to share some of the tools that are available to citizen scientists for these kinds of crowdsourcing efforts, to share stories of how citizen science has already helped find lost species and ultimately what all of these efforts mean for conservation impact. So we'll start, first of all, giving the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. Brian, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, thanks, Lindsay. I'm Brian Sullivan. I'm based at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I started there in 2005, developing the project eBird, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. And then switched over in 2017 to a project called Birds of the World. Yeah, I'm based in California, so I'm sort of the West Coast regional lead for the lab. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. And then Ian, next.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Ian Campbell. I'm with the Paddy Aware Foundation. and we're a global non-profit, and we collaborate with the Professional Association of Diving Instructors, or PADI. So any of you out there that are a diver will probably be aware of PADI. And we develop conservation programs to work with the millions of PADI divers and PADI dive operators and the PADI professionals around the world to do ocean conservation. And we're probably here to talk to you about our collaboration on the sharks and rays.
Wonderful. And Carrie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Seltzer. I'm the head of engagement for iNaturalist. iNaturalist is a social network connecting people around the world to biodiversity and advancing science and conservation. And in my role as head of engagement, one of the things I do is help build collaborations around the world. One of the other things I do is help tell the stories of the incredible discoveries and the impact that everyone's having through their participation in iNaturalist.
Great, welcome. Aristide?
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Aristide Takukam Kamla. I am the president and founder of the African Marine Mammal Conservation Organization based in Cameroon, and we're working on issues related to marine species conservation. I am also the founder of the Starling app, a citizen science app that we have developed to help fishermen document opportunistic sightings of marine wildlife in Cameroon. And I'm also a National Geographic Explorer and 2024 Whitley Award winner.
Great, thank you for being here. Pav?
Hi, everyone. My name is Pav Johnson. I'm from Sweden. I'm a biologist, a teacher, and a tour guide. And I was lucky enough earlier this year to lead a group of birdwatchers on a tour in New Zealand. And I just bumped into a moth that had not been seen for 65 years. Just like that. That's still the reason why I'm here.
Great, we'll definitely have some more questions for you about that. And last but not least, Stuart.
Hi, my name's Stuart Cable. I'm a botanist at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, in London. I've had a long association with Madagascar, and about 20 years ago, I helped Dr. Hélène Valamanana set up the Kew Madagascar Conservation Centre in Antananarivo. And at the very beginning, we were focused on taxonomy, but we've completely reframed our operation to focus on finding lost species and conserving them, and doing research into how to best conserve ecosystem species and how to manage them sustainably.
Wonderful. We're very happy to have you all here. Thank you for your introductions. So I've got a few questions that I'll ask. And for those of you tuning in, please drop your questions in the chat for the panelists, and we'll get to as many as we can in the hour. So my first question, and this is for anybody on the panel, can you share how citizen science has transformed your respective fields or projects in the search for lost species?
I will go.
Right.
Yeah, so again, I'm a manatee researcher. This question reminds me my first days of field work when I was going to look for the African manatee, a species that I've only known from, internet or from the TV. And this was the Florida manatee. And I was expecting that when I would go on the field on the field work to look for manatee, I would see them in the clear water, and I would be able to count them and come back with this very nice report for my master's degree. But I was very shocked after spending 2 months on the field without seeing any manatee. And I've almost spent all the stipend money that my mom gave me. And I was ready to give up until I met with a fisherman who actually, I've asked him a question, I've been told that there are manatees here, but I can't see any. And I know that I've heard also that there's a lot of manatee poaching here, but how people kill manatee without being able to see them. So this is where he asked me, how do you look for the manatee? And then I explained to him. He told me, no, man, you're doing it the wrong way, because I was not going early enough, when the water is still calm, and I was looking for the wrong sign. And these fishermen actually taught me how to observe an African manatee, something that was not in the literature, in any literature. And by applying, and the next day I went with him on his canoe, and after 45 minutes of paddling, he made me see my first African manatee. From this experience, this experience made me very humble because I came there as the researcher, the guy who knows more than, all the guys in the village. But that experience really showed me that the local knowledge is very important because these fishermen spend most of their day on the water, and they have a lot of experience observing these species. And at that moment, I decided to create this citizen science network where I provided a smartphone to fishermen so that each time they see a manatee, they could document it. And this has completely not only changed my perception towards the fishermen, but he has helped me to collect a tremendous amount of data on these elusive species living in this cryptic water. And today we know much better about the African manatee through the support, through the contribution of the local fishermen. So yes, really transformed the way we do our marine research in Cameroon.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. And for all of our lost species expeditions, we always start with interviews with the local communities, collecting that data from them because they certainly know the landscape best. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that question? Okay, well, let's move on to how critical do you think that citizen scientists are in the search for our list now of more than 4,500 lost species?
Hi, Lindsay. Yeah, I think that citizen science are going to be absolutely critical for this. They're going to form a central component of this because the vast sort of swathes of numbers of people that can potentially collect data, and kind of we look at things as from the dive perspective. There are 28 million registered PADI divers. There are nearly 7,000 PADI dive centers around the world in 184 countries. There are 130,000 instructors. And like Aristide was saying, the instructors and the operators who are in countries, they know where to look for things, and they know, they can provide insight at a local level. And then if you've got the scale of like the 28 million registered divers, and I'm sure that, for birds and for terrestrial animals will have the same kind of scale. If you can activate that scale, you can really sort of capture things that no scientific or research institute can. And just as an example, well, it's not a lost species. I was at a shark conference last week. One researcher who does work in French Polynesia on grey reef sharks, sharks that people see all the time. He was speaking to some local divers from French Polynesia, and they showed him a video. Said, "Could you tell us what's happening here?" And they'd captured 2 grey reef sharks mating in the wild, which had never been captured before. And then they said, "Oh yeah, we got other video footage like this," and they'd actually captured grey reef sharks giving birth in the wild. And the scientists who've been studying this thing, like Aristide said, for years, had never seen this thing. So a lot of the time, you've got citizen science who aren't even realizing what they're seeing. So they're going to be absolutely critical in regardless of whether they're looking for sharks and things in the ocean, on land, or up trees, or fly. They're going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah, can I just build on what Ian said and reference back to Aristide's amazing story? Something that I think about a lot with iNaturalist is I feel like in this sort of community, we talk all the time about how people need biodiversity, but I don't think we talk nearly enough about how biodiversity needs people, because each person, wherever you are in the world, there are things that you notice, that you can see, that you're paying attention to, that almost everyone else isn't. And I think the beautiful thing that we've tried to do through iNaturalist is make it possible for everyone with a camera connected to the internet to be recording and sharing what they see. And even if they don't know what it is, getting input from this global community that includes experts as well as novice naturalists who are just curious people paying attention. And I think Aristide's story about trying to find this species and then realizing that there's there were these people who knew how to find it, like making those sorts of connections. I'm just so excited about the possibilities when we get even more people paying attention to nature.
Great. And maybe, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like we're in this really amazing spot right now with the blend of technology that we have at our fingertips and this burgeoning network of citizen scientists. So if you think about birds, unlike Aristide's story with the manatee, birds are fairly well known already, and there's millions of people who watch birds. And when we built eBird in 2005, if you think back to sort of what the internet technology was then, it was like AOL dial-up and all this stuff. You know, it's come a long, long way. But that the ability to harness that technology and put a platform in front of people who are already doing something they love, which was watch birds, was kind of, it was a sort of hand in glove, you know, very, very, wasn't a simple thing to do, but it worked, you know, and now we've got millions of people around the world that are using eBird and gathering a lot of data. And we have that opportunity, as Carrie was saying, with iNaturalist to do this now for all taxa. And it's really amazing. The idea of lost birds, you've got to kind of know what you got out there on the landscape. And citizen science is really it's the way to get that baseline information. So for birds, you know, eBird and other sources were used to figure out which birds are actually lost in the first place. You know, so we have to do that with all the taxa moving forward. And I think we have a great opportunity at our fingertips as more technology is leveraged and put in front of these communities.
Great. Yeah, and Stuart.
I'd like to say that it's also a good tool, as well as for citizen scientists, for conservation practitioners on the ground. We use iNaturalist for mapping populations of rare species and for monitoring phenology of trees, in particular for our Millennium Seed Bank project, which is trying to bank the seeds for conservation of the rarest tree species in Madagascar. So it's good for everybody. But we started using iNaturalist 10 years ago, and we were a little bit skeptical at the beginning because we thought, well, smartphones weren't very prevalent at the time, and we thought we'd be the only ones using it. But more and more people have smartphones, and even though data is an issue, people can use iNaturalist offline and then upload their observations when they get home or have a Wi-Fi connection. And from something which started small 10 years ago, we've got, I think now in our Zavamaneri Gassi iNaturalist project, 87 or 85,000 observations of 5,700 species. And those are mostly research grade observations. So the identifications have been confirmed by a number of people. And that's half of the flora, which is absolutely amazing. And although the rarest species, you know, we haven't that many observations of them, we are mapping species and learning a lot more about the flora. And we use the data for modeling and various other things. So it's been great for us.
Wonderful. And Pav, I'd like to turn to you, since you used these tools, iNaturalist, to actually rediscover lost species. Can you just briefly tell us that story and how that experience has influenced your perspective on the importance of public involvement in this kind of rediscovery?
Well, in a way, it was not a totally new thing for me, because in Sweden we have, let's call it a system called Artportalet. It's like the portal of the species. It's actually funded by authorities. So it's some kind of a mixture of a database and a portal used both by amateurs, but also professionals and the authorities. So I'm quite used to this kind of sharing information and getting information. And of course, I've been using iNaturalist before, but the thing is, when I went to New Zealand earlier this year, it was my first trip to New Zealand. I'd never been there before. I'm primarily a birder, but also a lepidopterist, and I just brought my equipment with me. We were actually staying at the only hotel at the Stewart Island in the very south in New Zealand, a very scarce populated area. I mean, there are almost no roads. There is a small community, Oban, with I think 240 citizens. It's yeah, and on that balcony, I just put up my UV light, and I took some photographs late at night after I have been out spotting kiwi birds. And I didn't do anything about those photographs until I went back to Sweden and uploaded them on iNaturalist. And one of the moths that I really couldn't identify by myself turned out less than 24 hours later. It was a species that a lot of Kiwis, not talking about the birds, have been searching for a very long time. It was latest seen in 1959, and that was just, yeah. So I thought actually that story would be about, okay, this moth exists, and it exists in a place where we didn't know that it ever existed. That is Stewart Island. But the big thing was that I was a nobody, a non-New Zealander, knowing nothing, just put up this lamp on a balcony. That was the headline story in the national television and so forth. So it didn't change my perspective. I would say it didn't change my perspective, but it added some other aspects. For example, one thing is that you should know that the climate when you go to social media and interact on the internet is sometimes very harsh. It's a very, I don't know. You have to be careful out there. But when it comes to those nature nerd enthusiasts, I think the community is very warm and welcoming. You don't have to be an expert, and you can actually have the straight access to the professor in lepidopterology. And there's no, I think it's a quite unique situation how the expert meet the common people.
Yeah, I think iNaturalist is probably one of the friendliest social platforms to be on. And we very much appreciate that. And actually, Carrie and Brian, we have a question from somebody tuning in about the main differences between eBird and iNaturalist.
Yeah, I can jump in there. eBird is really focused on birds for a start, and iNaturalist is all taxa. One of the fundamental differences is that eBird operates off a checklist system. So iNaturalist is really sort of one observation at a time, whereas eBird is you're submitting a complete checklist of birds every time you go birding. So you can imagine if you go to your local park and you walk for an hour through your local park, you're recording all the observations of every species of bird that you see. Over time, and with millions and millions of those kinds of checklists, you can get at presence and absence and different kinds of scientific questions than you can with observation or observational data, presence-only data. So there are a little bit of differences in the way that the databases are structured behind the scenes. But I would say, eBird's been really great in terms of a technical platform for engaging birders. iNaturalist is, Carrie, you can talk about this better than I can, but iNaturalist, really started from the community up in terms of, the idea was let's build a community around nature observation. And what's really cool about that is that, at least from my perspective as someone who uses both of these things very regularly, I love the fact that I can go on a walk and take pictures of plants and not know anything about them. And iNaturalist gives me an answer right away. This is what we think it is based on, AI and machine learning, computer vision analysis of that image. That's great for me. But then later, the community of experts actually says, yeah, the AI didn't get that right. It's actually this. And it's really cool learning process. And I think that the opportunity that we have right now is to really expand this idea of citizen science into broader communities where people are interested in nature, but they don't necessarily have even binoculars. They might just have a smartphone so they can record bird sounds, or take pictures and things like that, then you're talking about an exponential explosion of data that, where we think about for eBird right now, human beings are sensors looking through binoculars. But we have a lot of opportunity to leverage the technology as sensors to record data and have human beings kind of distributing those things around the planet. So it's an exciting time for citizen science. I think we are at this inflection point where you really don't need to be an expert to make amazing contributions in this space.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize what Brian said about how eBird and iNaturalist can be really complementary. I think sometimes people like to put us in competition with each other, and we really aren't. Like we talk with the eBird folks regularly. Like iNaturalist and eBird are doing two distinct but complementary things, and there's lots of people who will, put all their birding on eBird and put all their other things, or even sometimes bird evidence on iNaturalist, since eBird is interested in the counts of live birds in that checklist model primarily.
Great. And let's move from land to sea then. So Ian, can you talk a little bit more about PADI-aware and how that Shark and Ray Census app involves divers and the role that divers are going to play in finding species that have previously disappeared from data records? I know this is a pretty overwhelming, challenging place for us to just send a team out to look for lost species. So by engaging PADI-aware, we're getting a lot more than what we could just sending a team out. So it'd be good to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And sort of just to give you a bit of sort of context on we're launching a global Shark and Ray census, which will be, we're in the testing phase at the moment, and we're going to be launching it early next year. And the kind of the rationale behind this is that obviously sharks are one of they're behind amphibians as one of the most threatened groups of species on the planet. There are multiple conservation measures in place, from fishing bans to gear bans, protected areas, but there's no real understanding as to whether they're working or not. So the rationale behind it was we want to get, sharks are a huge draw for divers around the world and snorkelers. And as I mentioned with the French Polynesia example, divers and snorkelers are seeing things that that they don't even know are world firsts. So we wanted to develop a way that divers and dive operators can monitor these shark and ray populations. There's two kind of programs, two kind of levels of the program. One is to any diver, snorkeler, if you're on a boat, tell us what you see. Tell us exactly what you see, where you see it, and let us know. And we're partnering with James Cook University to provide the kind of scientific and taxonomic expertise behind that. But the other, and I think this is sometimes a weakness possibly of citizen science, and definitely in the marine world, is people forget the importance of not seeing anything. And what we wanted to do is we're working with dive operators around the world to identify specific sites around the world and to monitor those day and night, and tell us when you see something, but equally tell us when you don't see something. And that kind of elevates the value of zero. And that way, we're looking at being able to monitor trends of shark and ray populations globally. So and this will be launching early next year. So any of you who out there listening who are divers, we're coming for you and going to be asking you to be part of this. But one of the things that we also saw, again, and I'm speaking very generally, is kind of there's weaknesses and strengths of citizen science programs. And sometimes what we saw, some programs either are too citizen-y, they're developing data, but not necessarily for anything, or potentially even too sciencey, where participants need a kind of relatively a robust knowledge of science to participate. So we're trying to find that right balance to kind of activate these millions of divers worldwide. And when Rewild reached out to us and talked about the Search for Lost Sharks program, this is exactly what the Global Shark and Ray Census is designed for. We kind of are even shifting away from kind of the term citizen science. We can collect mass data, but PADI-aware, we're not a research organization, we're not a policymaker, we're not going to be suddenly looking at these, is where can this mass data be useful? And the search for lost sharks is a prime example of that. And if Rewild were to come to us and say, we want to search this geographical area, we will have, we're fairly confident that there will be some paddy dive centres and more importantly, paddy divers going there. And the collaboration with the dive centres in country, why that is important is that gives a legitimacy of working. It's not just parachute science going in, or it's about data collection, and that data will be shared with the relevant research bodies. So that's kind of we're looking at launching early next year. So I said, if you're a diver, please keep in touch with us, because we'll be coming for you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ian. And Aristide, you talked a little bit about the Siren app and how that how you work with local communities in Cameroon to participate. But what are some of the challenges that you've encountered with data collection in more remote areas?
My mic, yes. Yes, thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I have to note that we've been working with fishermen in Cameroon in this citizen science framework since 2012. The beginning was not really easy because we didn't know how to convince the fishermen to be part of it. And we learned it the hard way, and with success, with some failure and successes, we were able to get some lesson learned from our past experience. And today we know better how to approach fishermen. And one of those ways to approach them is to build a sense of trust between each other, having this family spirit. So we don't just come and ask them, collect data for us, right? Because if you come and if it's just a transactional collaboration, it will not work. As long as the fishermen will not see an interest or a reward, he will move out. But if you build a family, a trust relationship between the fishermen and the network and you, it's more sustainable. I remember there was this fisherman called Papa Mensa, who was one of the first fishermen that we engaged in the network. And we approached him with this sense of trust. And after 2 years, he became one of the, how can I say, the advocates for sea turtle protection, whereas before he was a sea turtle poacher. So just to show you the impact of building this cross relationship, even if you don't have anything to give them. So the second important thing is also to be able to understand what is the need of those fishermen. How can you support them? I'm not talking here about a monetary transaction, but also saying what are the challenges they are facing, and some of these challenges could actually be resolved through the app itself. For example, we've been able to show them the importance of using the Siren app, how the data collected could help improve the management of the resources, and could also help them to report illegal fishing activity, which is impacting their fisheries. And also we are working currently to develop even certain feature like the compass that will be integrated in the app and will help them to guide them when they are in the ocean and maybe they lost direction. They could use the app to find their way. And the other incentive that we are using is also to value them. This is very important, because when fisherman doesn't feel like his value in collecting data, there is no interest for him collecting the data. Every year we organize an event called Street Whale. It's an event where we we gather stakeholders to promote ocean conservation in Cameroon. And during that event, we invite some of the best data collectors to the event, and we present them as heroes, like they can see how important the work they are doing, and in front of the government, in front of the private sectors. So this is how we have been able to, to mitigate the challenges of engaging local fishermen in using the app, because this is not something that is simple, but as long as you go with them naturally, you build trust, things will start moving smoothly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Stuart, so far we've been talking quite a bit about monitoring and collecting data on species that move, but your focus is a little bit different on plants, specifically lost plants in Madagascar and rediscovering rare species. So how do you incorporate citizen science data in such a specialized field, and what are some of the challenges that you face?
I think one of the biggest challenges for us is actually identifying records. Even if you collect a herbarium specimen, you won't necessarily get a certain answer as to the identity. But it's really important if you're using iNaturalist to take really good photographs. If you're standing in front of a plant, so try and take pictures of the leaves, both surfaces, the top side, the bottom side, anything about the plant which is unique, the bark, if it's a tree, flowers and fruit, and from different angles as well. And you should bear in mind that somewhere like Madagascar, this might be the first time that this plant is actually being photographed. So it could be absolutely vital. And at the moment, we have there's a specialist describing a new species of Combretum, which first turned up on iNaturalist. And it was well photographed by a botanist. We had a specimen actually sent it to Kew, but it was first identified as a new species on iNaturalist in the chat around the identity of the observation. So that's a key thing. But in Madagascar, I mean, it's quite extreme, high biodiversity. The flora is fairly unresolved. So for a lot of groups of plants, there's going to be new species, taxonomic uncertainty. So it's not always that easy to get a good identification. And certainly if you're visiting Madagascar or you're based in Madagascar, a student, or you've got the opportunity to travel, you take a picture of a plant, then at some point it'd be looked at by a specialist, I think. But everyone's, even specialists struggle sometimes to put a family or a genus or whatever. So anything you can think of, then put it in your observation. I think that's one of the key things. But really good photographs, we need that.
Great, and I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that are coming in. So someone says tech, connectivity, and literacy are essential so far for the tools that we're discussing. But how can we leverage local communities on the ground that are in more remote places and may not have the connectivity or may not speak the languages that we're speaking on these platforms? How can we better engage and leverage those local communities?
I can jump in first from iNaturalist. As Stuart mentioned, in Madagascar, one of the things they're able to leverage is the offline capability of iNaturalist to then be able to upload once you've got a better internet connection. Certainly still, I know that internet access is still very difficult in many parts of the world for sure. There's a lot of that is a big barrier that we don't have a ton of control over. But certainly, trying to figure out how to make the apps as lightweight as possible, as easy to use as possible. Photos sort of inherently have they take up a certain amount of data, but trying to be mindful in design so that it's not a real data hog. That's something we think about. Also, translation is super important, obviously, for an app to be usable by someone. They need to be able to understand it. So both the iNaturalist website and the mobile apps have been translated into dozens of languages. If it's been translated into that language, it should open in that language on your phone. If iNaturalist isn't translated into a language that you're interested in, please contact me, and I'd be happy to point you to resources about how that translation process works and see if we can get it into another language. We've also got common names in more languages than we have the app itself translated into. And again, if there's common names that you would love to see on iNaturalist that you don't yet, I'd love to point you to resources to figure out how we can get more of those names available.
You know, just build on what Carrie said. eBird and Merlin, which are the two big apps that the Cornell Lab puts out, kind of take the same approach. You know, they are fully functional offline so that you can collect data without connectivity and then upload it when you do get connectivity, which is really important. And then, as Carrie pointed out, translations are really key. You've got to make this stuff available in as many languages as possible, especially common names. So Merlin and eBird, I think, now support something on the order of 110 sets of common names for birds around the world, including, you know, some of the latest additions are things like Zulu, which are, you know, the first apps available with common names for birds in those kinds of languages. So it really, and when we release those apps in those languages, we just see the participation go through the roof. So the investment in language translation is really important to uptake and getting these things into broader communities.
Yeah, I want to chip in a little bit here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Select freezing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah. Language, as Carrie said, language is very important. For our case, we're working with fishermen, and many of them have not gone to school. So in this case, you know, sometimes if they put in French or in English, they won't really get it. So what we did with the Siren app is that we made it so that they don't even have to even read or write anything. We included a functionality that we call flash observation, which allowed the fishermen just to take a picture and share it. And then we do the rest of the job by identifying the name of the species, because usually fishermen, they don't have time. When they are on the boat, they're there for their business. They don't have time to like put details and so on. And we've realized that when we were asking them to fill a form to add like species name and trying to identify, the level of engagement was very low. But as soon as we make it simple for them to just add the photo and automatically the GPS is recorded, the date and time, now the level of engagement was much higher. And now what we did is now we collaborated with iNaturalist, and I'd say thank you again to Carrie for that. We were able to include what we call a kind of a link that allow us to push our data to on the iNaturalist platform, so that the identifier community on iNaturalist platform could help us provide the species identity. And so far, it's working great.
Great. And Pav, this one is for you. What advice do you have for someone who wants to go out and use these tools to find a lost species?
Share your observations in most possible ways. And I think one aspect, I think you have touched that subject already, is that, I mean, there were back then you have to have a specimen to make an observation accepted by I don't know, scientists, authorities. But today we have those recordings, we have bat detectors, we have actually I'm also connected to a research station, a biological research station, and we are right now on Öland in Sweden, Station Linné, and we are developing a method of analyzing the barcode from the DNA in a very inexpensive way. And we can also add that information when they put it on bold. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper. I think all those methods makes everyone could be not being the expert, but at least deliver the necessary data to the common knowledge. So I think yeah, the future is bright when it comes to identify and share information that are valid, that's valid.
Great. And I just want to put a plug in for If you go to rewild.org, you'll find a blog post about Pav's rediscovery of the frosted phoenix, which is a really cool name. So then let's talk a little bit about conservation and how rediscoveries help influence conservation actions on the ground, and if anyone here has any sort of specific examples of that. Stuart.
Yeah, if I may, I could give an example, a spectacular example, and this is how we started off with citizen science, being interested in it. An amazing discovery in Madagascar, 2007. A guy called Xavier Metz, who was the manager of a cashew plantation in a remote corner of Madagascar, a peninsula in the northwest, difficult to drive to. You have to go by boat to get there. He was out for a picnic with his family, and it's an area of Madagascar which is very open. Anyway, they had a picnic near some limestone karst, a small block of karst, with some weird-looking palms on the limestone. And he had an interest in plants, didn't know what they were, and he posted pictures on a chat forum for palm enthusiasts. Anyway, this circled around the internet, and various palm enthusiasts, nobody knew what it was, and eventually word got to Kew, to Dr. John Dransfield, our palm specialist at the time, and eventually he realized that actually it was a new species and quite different from anything else known. And we sent an expedition to look at this palm, collected some samples, and it turned out to be a new genus, which is really exciting. And the closest relative is in China, I think.
Wow.
But we found 23 adults at the site, and it's amazing that the leaves have stalks which are 5 meters long, and then the lamina of the leaf is about 5 meters in diameter. Absolutely amazing. But these things, we don't know how old they get, perhaps 100 years, but they only flower and fruit once and then they die.
Wow.
Which is a pretty amazing strategy, a risky strategy for a tree, a long-lived tree. Only 23 individuals, and one or two of them had flowered and fruited recently and were dying. Anyway, so that discovery was made through a sort of citizen science route. But then through iNaturalist, we put out the word and our contacts in the field, and eventually we found a few more sites of Tahina spectabilis, which is the name given to the new palm. But anyway, that was absolutely amazing. And if anybody's in London at Kew Gardens, we do have one or two small examples growing up in the greenhouses. But yes, so that's a new genus. And if you're with your phone, you're an iNaturalist or any of the other citizen science platforms in somewhere like Madagascar, there is a chance that you might make a really important discovery, even at the side of the road somewhere, or you're visiting a protected area where lots of people go. There's always a chance of discovering something. You probably need to have photographs of flowers, but things don't always flower regularly. So you might just be there at the right time to make an observation, which leads to an important discovery. Potentially a new species, but also just as important is discovering things which are known. Yeah. And I would say for Madagascar, if I can, there are, for trees, it's just for trees, there are about 190 species that are only known from the type specimen. That's the original specimen that was collected and described by a botanist, which is phenomenal, really. And then there are over 900 tree and shrub species, which are only known from the type specimen or from one single locality. And with deforestation or whatever. So, observations are really, really important.
If I would have build on just something that Stuart said as well. Obviously, our hunt for lost sharks and rays will start in earnest next year, but also discovering information of what is known. So there's an example, very good example of a dive operator, PADI dive operator in Fiji, that ran or still runs a shark interaction experience where dives go out and they can interact with sharks. And over the course of about 14 years, they started collaborations with local villages in the region and researchers around the world started tagging some of the shark species and monitoring the shark species. This led to a complete closure and protection of the area of this species, but also discovered that some of the nearby river mouths where the divers weren't going, so when the collaboration with the local fishing community happened, they discovered that was a really important scalloped hammerhead nursery area. So that became proven by the data that was generated from the scientists, but it all generated from the citizen science data that was collected and suddenly said, well, there's something interesting to look at here. And it led to the Fijian government declaring that a closed area and an important area for scallop hammerheads, which are an endangered species. So the importance of, and as Stu said, even seeing things that are known, there's still so much, and yes, so we're talking about marine species and sharks and rays, but I'm pretty sure that, there's so much to be discovered out there, even in things that we, inverted commas, know. It can really lead to important protections and measures that will help improve the status, across the planet. So it's, the importance of getting involved is, can really lead to huge impacts from a conservation perspective.
If I can just add, you would have thought it'd be easy to make observations of trees and shrubs because they don't move as fast as other things. But in Madagascar, again, as an example, there are over 5,000 endemic trees and shrub species, and half of them haven't been recorded for 25 years, which is stunning. So anyone can make an important contribution through citizen science.
Great. And what are the future developments that you foresee in citizen science, especially now with the advancements in technology like AI and machine learning? What's the next phase here?
Yeah, I can jump in there from well, I mean, I think everybody on this call realizes that citizen scientists are essentially now measuring the heartbeat of the planet, right? We are engaging communities around the world to tell us about all kinds of animals, plants, all this information is flowing in. The exciting thing I think that's on the horizon is using more automated ways of recording or gathering data. So not just observational data from people with cameras, but having people, you can think about for birds, for example, we have this feature in the Merlin Bird ID app called Sound ID. And it's essentially, you can sit out on your back porch and turn it on and it'll tell you what birds are singing. It's amazing. Turning that kind of stream of information into observational data that we can pair with the stuff that's coming in from human beings and citizen scientists is going to be really a game changer for getting data from places in the world that are really difficult to monitor, whether it's, the great forests or difficult to access points on the planet, under the oceans, or in the oceans with hydrophones and things like that. But turning those streams of data that are being collected autonomously into data that we can do something with for conservation is going to be really, really important, I think, in the future, and the not distant future. It's here.
Yeah, and what Brian is mentioning will be possible and is possible to some extent with autonomous systems. I want to emphasize that it really is only possible because of the people who have collected the data that makes those automated systems possible. The people collected the data, and the experts who have labeled the data, have identified it. We can't do it without those essential pieces. And in so many parts of the world, we are still building that foundational data. I saw there was a question in the chat about iNaturalist suggestions not working well in North Africa, for example. We can only suggest so far the close to 100,000 species. And those are sort of, I would say, the most commonly observed 100,000 species in the English speaking world, let's say. We've got a lot in Mexico, a lot in Europe, North America in general, some other hotspots around the world, but we still have so much. And almost 100,000 species, that's still only like 5% of the 2 million described species. We have so far to go. And in order to get into that group of about 100,000 species that we're modeling, that we're making predictions on, we need about 100 observations of a species before it gets to that level, right? And so I just want to emphasize too that like these lost species, these especially uncommon things those rediscoveries are going to be so important, but so is the common stuff, especially if you're in one of these parts of the world that doesn't have as much biodiversity data yet. We need to understand the common stuff so that we can understand the rare stuff too.
And I just wanted to kind of, while we were in the process of launching the global shark and ray sensors, we're already thinking about, how can AI add value? And it's often said, AI is often touted as the kind of the holy grail and the answer to everything, but AI needs to be taught. When we've been speaking to our shark taxonomists, we need to have verified photos, verified data that then kind of feeds and improves the algorithm. And you need mass amounts of data. You need mass amounts of data that can then be verified down to, whether it's species, genus, family level, or whatever. Because at the moment, and I'm speaking for sharks and rays, the AI system of identifying anything other that isn't, like a whale shark or even a species of hammerhead shark is so far off. We're years away. But so citizen scientists will be absolutely critical to get AI to even anywhere close to a place where it needs to be.
Yeah, I would just build on that and say that, for birds, we're doing pretty good when it comes to photo ID with birds. We've got, as you say, the models are trained up now on thousands of bird species, so they do pretty well. But when it comes to sound ID, right now we're in that space that Carrie's talking about, where, we need human beings to record birds, load their observations in, and then give us annotations on those recordings that say, this is a northern mockingbird, this is a, black-headed grosbeak, and actually taking the little bits of the spectrogram and identifying them so the models can be trained. And we've got a long way to go with sound ID, but once we get there, we will be able to deploy these kinds of automated units to give us streams of information. That'll be pretty amazing.
Great. And then we just have 2 more minutes left here, but does anybody have any last words of encouragement to our citizen scientists who have joined today? Stuart.
Just to say, your observations are really important, and we've just heard another good use, training these AI models, which will improve identification. Really, really important. But yeah, give the specialists a chance. Make sure you take really good photographs so that the identifications are good, as well as the algorithms that will result from the identifications.
And I want to thank anyone who's involved in whatever sort of animal group that you're involved in. Citizen science is critical to understand, and we're a conservation organization, where the conservation measures are working. And if you can have the best meaning policies, the best meaning measures in the world, but if it's not affecting populations on the ground or in the water or in the air, these policies and conservation measures are meaningless. So, and citizen science, and like I say, more towards mass collection of data, will be able to say whether these conservation measures are working. And I've seen there's lots of questions about extinctions and IUCN specialist groups. Every contribution you make will be useful to saying, yes, this is working, keep doing more of it, or no, we need to start thinking again from scratch.
Just say, get involved. There's so many opportunities. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. So pick one, pick a few, go for it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for such a great discussion. Really appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody who joined today. And we hope to see you on these apps using these resources. Thanks so much, all. Okay, take care.